Hello, this is Jill Walahoski. I'm an Extension Educator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm joined today by Suzanne Lemenestrel, who's a National Program Leader in Youth Development Research at the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, USDA. We're here to present Part 2 of the Introduction to the National 4-H Common Measures System, and Part 2 will focus on users and organizations. The features of the current online system include security and current features, which we'll discuss in this section, authentication and authorization features, users, organizations, surveys, and reports. And again, we'll be focusing largely on users and organizations in this section of the discussion. To begin, we wanted to offer some information about the protection of participants and data integrity. Designated administrators for the LGU, or in the case of a grant for the grant, will be able to manage the authentication and authorization process for their LGU or their grantees. The guidelines by which data will be collected and reported will be governed by the Institutional Review Board for each participating land-grant university, and each land-grant university will determine access to their data for aggregate reporting unless it's designated by the grants. Grants will require approval for national aggregation, and we'll actually cover that in the third section of this training. To begin, one of the first steps to use the online system is to establish the administrative role. Again, this is the ability for land-grant universities or grants to manage the authentication and authorization for your users. It also allows you to authorize permissions appropriate to each user. And also this role has access to all the surveys and all the reports created within their LGU or grant, and the ability to run reports on all of that data. The first step to gaining the ability to be an administrator is to request an administrative login, and that's simply an email that's generated to the Common Measures at 4h.org email address, which will be shared at the close of this presentation. You'll send an email address from the state leader or from the grant manager requesting the name of the person who needs administrative rights, and we'll just need a full name and email address. Once the request has been made and been entered in the system by the administrators, you'll receive an email confirming the account creation. You'll have invitation email instructions. You'll have the opportunity to accept the terms and conditions of the website, and an opportunity to change your password. And we'll actually look at screenshots of all of those pieces in just a moment. Once you receive your email invitation, it will look just like what you see here on the screen. It will be from Common Measures at 4h.org. And you'll see down near the bottom of the screen there's a blue link for Activate Your Account and Set Your Password. You'll simply click on that link. It will take you to a screen that looks just like this, where you're able to review the terms and conditions of the website. There's a green accept button there at the bottom when you're prepared to accept those terms and conditions. I should also note that the terms and conditions will continue to be available to you once you've entered the website. There's a link in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, so this isn't your only opportunity to review those pieces. But to move forward in establishing your account, you'll need to accept the terms and conditions here. It will then take you to a screen that looks just like this, where you'll have an opportunity to set your password. The information in terms of email, first name, and last name will already be loaded on the screen, as will any phone numbers that the person who set up your account entered on your behalf. So the pieces you'll need to manage here are the creation and the confirmation of your password. The password has to be 8 characters in length and a combination of numbers and letters. Once you've established your password, you'll click on the green Set My Password button, and it will direct you to a screen that looks just like this. It will say your password was successfully set and that you are now signed in. The screen that we just saw a moment ago was our homepage screen, and on that screen you'll see a dashboard message, a series of navigation tabs which we'll go through in more detail. You'll see a link for support where which will generate an email if you have questions as you're using the site. You'll see the button for signing out. You'll see your username up in the right-hand corner. And you'll also see running along the right-hand side of the screen information about the most recent surveys and responses to those surveys that are generated within your LGU or under your grant. We'll go live to the actual site in a moment to look at this in detail, but the first step we want to visit about is management of the organizations. Only users with admin permissions, so those of you that designated either through your LGU or through the grant were established with admin permissions, will be able to see the Organizations tab. Through that Organizations tab, you'll be able to manage the sites that are either part of your LGU or part of your grant. We'll see a button on the right-hand side of the screen under the Organizations tab that says New Extension, and that refers to any county, parish, borough, or grant site. It's any unit by which you'll want survey data to be collected and grouped together. You have the ability to manage those sites. In the case of the land-grant universities, all of your counties, boroughs, or parishes are loaded, but certainly you can edit those should there be reasons that you want to create multi-county sites, regional sites, or districts. And again, we'll take a look at that in just a moment as we go to the live site. And then also, just a note, again, admins will have access to adding, deleting, or editing new extension groups. So again, just as it refers to in the bullet above, that's any unit by which you want data to be collected and managed, and you have the ability to manage that in the way that works best for your organization. And just a final note on organizations. Organizations can't be deleted if a survey has been created directly by that organization. Before we move further into the presentation, I'm actually going to stop the PowerPoint and go to the live site. Okay. So a moment ago we talked about creating your account, and once you're logged in and you've successfully set your password, you'll be logged into an account that looks much like what you see here on the screen. Again, as I mentioned a moment ago, you'll see the link for the dashboard. This will always bring you back to the home screen. You'll see the support link, which allows you to generate an email to the commonmeasures@4h.org email address, also found here at the bottom of the dashboard message. So should you have questions, need to add additional admin users, or simply need support as you're using the features of the online system, you can generate a message to that address. There's also a sign out button for when you're finished with your activity on the page that day. And then up in the very right-hand corner, you can see that this is an account created for Jessica Bauman at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You'll see your username up there in the right-hand corner, so you'll know that you're appropriately logged into the correct account. You'll also see as an admin a series of 4 tabs that run across the top of the screen. Again, you'll see the Reporting tab, the Organizations tab, the Users tab, and the Surveys tab. Only an admin will see all 4 of these tabs, and as we talk in the next section about adding additional users, you'll be able to learn more about the permissions that are granted to individual users of the sites. But again, as the admin, you'll see a setup that looks exactly like what you see here on the screen. Also, just one last note on this home screen, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that you've got a tracker that gives you a snapshot of the most recent new surveys that have been created by your land-grant university or within your grant. And you can also see a tracking of the surveys that have been completed against each of those created surveys, and also shows the date, the last date that data was entered against those surveys. Next, we'll go in and look at the actual Organizations tab. Again, I mentioned a moment ago that for land-grant universities, you'll see your counties are already loaded. So what you'll see here at the top is your land-grant university. In this case, Jessie is an admin for the University of Nebraska, and so as you're the admin for an LGU, that will appear first at the top of the screen. If you're associated with a grant, the name of the grant will appear here at the top of your list, similar to what you see here for the LGU. You can see here under the Actions tab that is associated with that land-grant university that we have the ability to edit that organization and change any of the information in terms of the way it's listed here on the screen. But we don't have the ability to delete, and that's just a protection feature so that you don't mistakenly delete your organization. Below the land-grant university, you'll see a listing of then all of the county sites that are associated with that land-grant university. You'll also see up here in the right-hand corner of the screen the New Extension tab, and we'll go ahead and just click on that for a moment. Should you have the need to add an additional county site, to change a county site, to merge county sites together, if they're under the operation of one educator who perhaps is overseeing several counties and you want to group that data collection all in one place, you have the ability very simply by clicking on that button to go ahead and enter a new extension site name, and you can title that in whatever way that's appropriate to you. I'm not going to add one to this list today, but if I wanted to, I would just type the name in here, I would click submit, and I would see that appear in alphabetical order in the list that follows. An example of a multi-site location that's listed here in the University of Nebraska's list is BKR, which is a combination of 3 counties that operate under one educator as one unit, and so that's an example of why you might have a reason to use a multi-county site. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. The next feature or ability that you'll have as an admin is the ability to add and edit your users. And so just like with the organizations, only someone with admin permissions for the land-grant university or the grant will see this users tab. As an admin, you'll see all of the users associated with your land-grant university or grant, and you'll retain the ability to edit or delete those users. After creating an account for a user that you want to add, you'll have the opportunity to apply permissions. And I should add that we'll look at actually on the live site how to add a new user, but the process for adding a new user will look very similar to the process that you went through becoming an admin. You'll go ahead and enter a first and last name and an email address, and then an electronic message will be delivered to the inbox of that email address that you entered, and that person will go through the same series of steps, accepting the terms and conditions and resetting their password to establish their access into the site. So again, you'll be able to create new accounts, new users, and you'll be able to decide, do you want those users to be an administrator? Do you want them to have survey-only privileges, reporting-only privileges, or multiple permissions? And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then you'll determine the types of permissions that you want an individual user to have based on their roles and responsibilities in your organization, and also based on any human subjects training requirements of your land-grant university. In some instances, it may be that only persons who have privileges to administer surveys and collect and analyze data are persons who've been through the human subjects training requirements of your LGU. And again, all of that is governed by the individual land-grant university who's administering the survey and collecting data. We'll go through a series of screenshots for adding a new user, and then again, as I mentioned, we'll go actually to the live site. So to add a new user, again, we're looking at a screenshot of the admin account for Jessica from the University of Nebraska. So you can see she's added a series of users to her account, but she's able to add another new user by clicking on the Invite New User. Again, just like the organizations for adding a new extension, it appears in that same place next to the green plus. Once you click on Add New User, again, you'll enter the email address for the user you're wanting to add, the first name and the last name. You also have the options of adding primary phone or mobile phone should you want to record contact information in that way. But the only required fields here are the email, the first name, and the last name. Once you've established that information, you'll click on the Send Invitation, and again, that user will receive the same type of email from Common Measures at 4H.org that you received, and they'll also have the link then for going in and establishing their account. What you'll see after you generate the email is a little gold bar at the top that says the invitation email has been successfully sent. And then at this point, you'll also have the ability to add permissions. There are 3 types of permissions that an individual user might have. An admin is one option of permissions, and that person would have full permissions specific to that organization. So either full permissions specific to a land-grant university or full permissions specific to a grant. The admin account can create and manage other users and organizations, as we're currently looking at. They can also perform any of the survey or reporting features that we'll look at in the next section. The only thing admins cannot do at this time is modify the question sets. The question sets for common measures at this time are in place, and you're not able to add additional questions. You're simply able to select and utilize from the current bank of existing questions. Other features for permissions are survey and reporting, and so as you add new users, you may decide that a user needs survey permissions, the ability to create, edit, and administer surveys. Again, within a particular organization, you'll also have the ability to decide, do you want them to have survey permissions for your entire grant or your entire land-grant university, or just specific to a county or other identified location. Similarly, you may decide that an individual needs reporting permissions, the ability to run reports once data is collected. Again, it can be across an entire land grant or just within a specific unit like a county. Once you decide you're ready to add permissions, you'll click on the Add Permissions button that we saw on the previous screen, and it will bring up a screen that looks just like this. You'll see drop-down menu boxes for the role, so at that point you'll decide, do you want the person that you're working on the account for to have admin, survey, or reporting privileges. The user that name will be auto-populated. That's the current user's account that you're working on. And then also you can see there the Organizations tab. Again, it's a drop-down menu. This is, again, the drop-down menu for the University of Nebraska, so the entire land grant is the first thing on the list. And as you click on that caret, then you'll be able to see all of the counties that are associated with that land-grant university. Once you've correctly selected the sections for role and organization that you want that person to have access to, you click on Create Permission, and it will say permission was successfully created. At this point, you can either complete your process and just go back to the Users tab, or you can decide that you may want to add a second permission. And so in the very bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you see the box again for Add Permissions. So you could click on that again and go through the same series of steps. You may have individuals who need both survey and reporting features, and so this gives you the ability to apply multiple permissions to any one individual. Once you've completed that process, again, going back to the Users tab view, you'll be able to see that new person then added to your users list. Just looking at the information that's captured there from left to right, you'll see the name and the email addresses associated with the users that have been added under your organization. You'll also see the date that the invitation was sent to that particular user. You'll see the date that they confirmed. You'll see the types of permissions that you've granted to that person. So this is a quick snapshot. Should you ever need to review and edit the permissions, you can quickly see here what types of permissions they do have, the date that those permissions were created. And then in the Actions column off to the very far right, with that first icon, you have the ability to edit that user's account should you need to change the name or the email associated with that account. You also, with the little wrench icon, have the ability to edit their permissions. So at any time you decide that you need to give different permissions or delete some of the permissions that a user currently has, you use that icon. And then with the little green X, you're able to actually delete users should you have the reason to do that. The only user you cannot delete is yourself. So you'll see that first name listed there does not have the green X. That's the account that you're actually working in, and you can't delete yourself. Again, just another protection feature to make sure you don't accidentally delete yourself. This is an overview of the organizations and